Welcome to Wednesday evening, everyone, and here we are at Relove Guitars with Paul's, I think it's a Classic Vibe Strat, because Classic Vibes never have Classic Vibe written on them, but it's a very nice looking and well appointed thingy, but it has some issues. So it's got all this lovely golden chrome stuff, white plastics, and as you can see, just a nice looking sunburst, kind of gold plate, gold tuners, a bit crunchy, made in Indonesia. I think Classic Vibes used to be in China, but I guess they're now Indonesia. Anyway, it is a lovely looking thing, but there are a couple of problems. So first of all, it just doesn't play very well, which is not uncommon. Tuning stability is no good. There's a number of things. Tuning stability is no good. The action's a little bit too high. The screws on the bridge plate here are a bit all over the place. That one there, right in the middle, on the D, you can see it's sticking a mile up for no good reason. So we can lower the action, level the frets precisely, put a tusk knot on and get the first fret action right. You can also see there's just way too much wind on here, and there was a ton of unstretched slack in the string, so making it go out of tune very quickly. So nothing kind of overcomplicated in this setup really. It's just going to be giving the guitar the sort of treatment that it needs to play the best it can, so nothing hysterical about that. One of the things I noticed, which is a bit odd, is that there's no tone function that I can hear, which is very odd really. So if I hook it up to the amp for a minute. You'll hear. So on the neck pickup, we should have tone on this one. Nothing. I mean, just make sure it is that one and that one. Yep. So nothing, and there's no tone attached anywhere through, so that's something we're going to need to take a look at. But one of the things, it's quite a bright setting. It's quite a bright sounding pickups, but they're just tapeable. That's what you've got your tone controls for. So let us think about the first things first. And as you kind of know, most of the time, the series of, or the steps that I take with a guitar like this is, let's just kind of look at first of all, the neck relief with these 10, I think these are 10 gauge strings on. So neck relief, tiny bit of relief, that's good. That's enough. No more, no less. Let's look at the action down here. Well, a little bit too high. Let's set it anyway while we're at it, and then we can see where we end up on the first fret action, which obviously will change a little bit anyway when I put change the nut. So I've got a tusk nut for this guitar here. So we're kind of way over the height that it needs to be at. So I'll worry about the screws standing up on the plate itself later on. We'll just come down here. What we want to go for is I like to go for is a last fret action of 1.5 across to 1.25, and then a very slight spread in between. And that is just my target based on years of doing this. So I know what a typical guitar neck will do with a little bit of fret leveling thrown in. Now, of course, If you don't want to level your frets ever, then you don't have to, but it may mean that you have to play with a slightly higher action, because what's universally true is that when your neck is loaded, it will have some uneven frets in the overall topography of your neck in the fretboard. So you either kind of raise the action above them, and either by raising it here at the bridge, or potentially by putting some more neck relief in, which has a secondary effect of raising the action close to the somewhere in the middle, but it's primarily in the middle, so it's not really an ideal way to change your playing action. So I've gone too low here now. See, 1, 2, just over 1, 2, 5 is what I want. And so on and so on. So that's about right. Once I've got 2 or 3 of them done, I can sort of tend to be able to see a bit better now via the spread of the strings. This one's been cranked up until it's a bit seized actually, so it's not too bad now. Okay, we're just close to the 1.5 here already, so we'll just go for a tiny bit. Yeah, this one's cranked all the way up too. Yeah. So there. Be there in a second. So quick look, 1.25, fractionally over 1.25, which is not bad. Okay, that will be good for now. Obviously this will have detuned it, so the next thing I want to do is tune it up approximately, so I just use a tuning fork for that. So that's a pretty typical, fairly typical Squier type feel. Most of the frets play. A little bit of fret slap, as I call it, coming in there. But there's a low spot there around 12. And around about 7 as well. So what I'll do first is let's get the replacement tusk nut out. And the reason I use tusk is because I much prefer it to bone, which I find after years of practice or using different materials, personally I find bone a little bit too sticky, no matter how well you craft it or whatever you do. So this looks like it's the right spacing, so we'll go with that. It's a flat bottomed nut replacement, it's quite difficult. Squier actually makes enough different models so that you can't always get replacement nuts for a Squier Strat, which sounds odd. Graphtec tries to make replacement nuts for a variety of models, but they don't. It's impossible for them to keep up with everybody's production line models, and so that you quite often find you have to sort of I don't know what the word would be, make do by getting something with the right E to E spacing, which is the most important thing. If it's a customer's guitar, obviously the thing that they're going to want to have is something that feels familiar. So you don't want to be you don't want to be changing the E to E spacing, because that's the quickest way to make the guitar feel very alien to a player. So that's an important thing. If you're going to have to sort of modify an existing nut, you want to, oops, there goes some files. You want to go with the start with the E to E, which is what I did with this one. So let's have a look. It isn't actually glued in, sorry, it's glued in, it's not actually resined into place. So we're going to start with a hopeful little tapping down here, see if we can persuade it to go anywhere. Now sometimes it's a little difficult because it's there's nothing to bite into, so you can use a slightly spiky or slightly sharp little one which will get a bite on it. So this is bouncing on some rubber, so it sounds tough, but it isn't. Now what I'm finding is it wants to lift up, but it doesn't want to run along, so it's very tightly fitted. So the fact that it wants to lift up allows me to then go back in here and just tap it, hopefully tap it out, which I will try and do like so. It's actually trying to split this material here, which is it trying to split it, or is that part? No, it has. It's taken this little chip. So sometimes you have to guess what you're going to do here, because sometimes you have to cut the whole nut off, but you can't know. So there's a little flake. It's decided it wants to come out of its own free will. So now we have to guess whether the rest of it is cooperative or not. It is actually. So it's just that end. So there we are. There's the original out. So we've got a little bit of a, you can hardly see it actually in the real world, but a little bit of a repair to do. So let me get that taken care of. So what I'll do that in a second. What I'll do first is check the size of the nut. Now we're going to go for the exact same size, millimeters please. So we've got 271, 273, I guess a bit wider because it's, oh, excuse me, yeah, it's split at that end. That's not surprising. Let's just stick to one end then. So 275, call it, and this one's probably about 315, knowing these. Oh, 334, so it's quite wide. So I've got a fair bit of adjustment to do on this. So what I'll do is let's get up the board, sound block board, which is a messy old thing. What did I say? 275. And we're on 330, so 275, 330. So what we're going to do, I hope you can see me all right, something like that. I'm going to go and take the flat side like so, and I'm going to take down some thickness, checking the perpendicularness, narity of the sides relative to each other. So now we're at 319, 318. I probably ought to just do both sides. There's enough to come off that it probably makes better sense to do both sides. Sometimes when it's only a tiny amount, I stick to one, the one side without the tusk writing on it. Now that's already leaning a little bit, which is always the way, so it's quite hard to keep these completely stable. They tend to lean towards the top edge. So we get approximately near 295. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get a small board or a small thing for sanding on, something like this, and I'm going to just very carefully work it down to our target. What's it? Now the thing about replacing a little chip here with glue is you can get it and you can touch it up with Finish if you need to, but then you have to kind of be ready to polish that little area out, which can be quite a fandango if it's a curved section. So it's not the easiest thing to do in the world. Okay, so we want to do 275 consistently. So at this end we've got 297 and this end we've got 272. So we are thicker at one end for starters. So let's get this balanced out. It's quite tricky to keep this kind of right when you've got you've only got so much to play with, and if you go too far you don't have any more. All right, so let's have a look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to concentrate on this back end of the nut here. Put hardly any pressure at all on the treble end. And then we'll just check. So we've got 290 and 280. So a tiny little bit. Check the verticalness, it's looking good. And we'll go a tiny bit off the base end. So a little install feel. Right. There's a few bits of glue in there by the feel of it, so it needs just scraping a little bit. But it's close to fitting. It may be too short, and that's one of the other problems. So this looks like quite a tall thing, but I have got a fair bit of spare material which I can build it up. So it's never a simple task, I'm afraid. So the first thing, or one of the things we've got to do, is go in here and get this wad of glue out that's clogging up the front or the end of the fingerboard, and that was what was keeping the nut so firmly in place. Once we got that out of the way, and then we can sort of scrape across the floor of the nut slot just to make sure we've got everything out of the way. Right, yeah, so it's a shorter nut than before, so you can see it's sort of quite a nice fit there. It's rocking, so I wonder, this is a flat nut, but this one's trying to rock, so I wonder if there shouldn't be any curvature in this. That's interesting. There's some scratching on here. What's that from? I noticed one of the things that when you don't cut these off or don't use them right, what happens is these ends go around and you can see circles where they scrape around on the not what you want. So any scratches on the headstock may be to do with the string ends sticking out, which is definitely unsavoury. I'll show you the simple way to do them. I mean, it is pretty straightforward. We'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so we probably will have to boost this nut a tiny bit. Actually, one of the easiest things to do, there's something, it's hanging up in the middle somewhere. One of the easiest things to do actually is you can either boost it with some plastic material. I think we've got some glue on the back side here. You can either do it with some plastic or tusk material on the underside of the nut, or we can do it by using some rosewood, which is actually quite nice. Just attach a tiny little sliver of rosewood to the bottom, size it all up perfectly, and then it just sits on top of the rosewood that's already there. So it's quite a bit of glue stuck in that slot, hence why it didn't want to move. So that's better. What on earth is this? Don't tell me this has got a split in it. That's got a split, but what's this? Oh no, it's not a split, it's a little, it's just a little burr. Thank God for that. Anyway, right, so what am I going to do? I'm going to do a little rosewood booster. So we've got the cleanup thing to do here. Now, one of the things that I find, no matter how much you wish that you can fix things without any glue or anything running anywhere, it's incredible that the glue will wick underneath. I wonder if a bit of copper might do. I've never tried this before, but it certainly doesn't work with this green tape or masking tape. So copper might be a worthwhile attempt, given it's, I know it's not really going to work terribly well with frog tape. Frog tape's supposedly great for, you know, masking a clean, sharp line for painting, you know, kind of house decorating. But with certain substances like super glue, it seems not to want to behave. So I'm going to cut down some pieces. So this is sort of a diversion. So that's what you get. As you can see, we get a nut that has the right E to E spacing, which is wonderful. But then the downside is it's not tall enough for the Squier Classic Vibe nut. But you might say, well, why don't you just leave the original? And the reason I don't is because the original is sticky and it's made of bone, and I could spend hours trying to free up the slots so they don't grip. But my experience, as I said, is that bone has a propensity to stick that tusk doesn't, which is why over thousands of setups I've settled on using tusk wherever I can. So this is my attempt to just sort of, block off a little area here, so that if I do get any overspill, it'll be limited to a small area. That's the plan. We shall see. Ultimately, when we're dealing with rosewood, in the worst comes to the worst, we can always fix and clean up. It's amazing what you can do with wood. But having said that, it's also, people think, you know, when they say to each other on forums things like, oh yeah, just to cover that over with you know, stick some such and such, or glue that back on just like that. And it really isn't that simple. The idea, if you think about it, the idea of getting a piece of gloss finish back on and stuck down in such a way that you wouldn't see it is actually impossible. And I hate to disappoint you, but it can't be done, because there is always a sign or an indication that it's come up. There's a disjunction between parts of the finish. So there's my little sort of blocked off bit for a second, and we'll see what we can do. Also, the other thing you find is handling the piece that's come away is itself a really difficult undertaking. Again, people sort of seem to treat it as if you can just hoist it around and attach it back and everything's going to be fine. But actually, you probably find that handling the piece itself, you can't do it with clip pliers because it's too small. What can you do it with? Well, you can sort of push it into place, is what I found, and that again is also not very ideal. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get ready with some glue and some whatever that thing is. I'm looking for a word called accelerator. So if you put too little glue on, your problem may be that you you put too little glue on, you may not stick down the edges, in which case you can still feel them and you might have to add glue afterwards. Too much glue and of course it will roll around, make a mess. Okay, so this is, I can see where it wants to fit on. That's the edge of the nut slot there, so that's its natural home. Problem is you don't get an awful lot of time either to do this, and you don't get a lot of a lot of tools to do it with. So if I looked at the finest pliers that I've got available to me, and they're not usually fine at all, but you know, I could potentially just lift that up and drop it back down. Now, am I convinced that's the corner? Where else would we have? We've got a, it comes in there, smaller. I'll just line it up for a second, but it's, again, it can be quite difficult to actually handle this without bits coming away. So I'm thinking about, let's see where the grain looks. So I'm going to turn it over and look at the grain. Grain goes, okay, the grain goes long ways. That's narrow, that's wider. Okay, I think, see, I can't even turn it over now. Come along. There you go, fantastic. Now, which way am I trying to look at this thing? Grain goes long ways. Lost it again. It looks like it should go a different way on, but I don't want to get fooled. So there's the grain long ways. There's where I want to tip it over. And that is what it's saying is the right way up. But to me, that looks odd. So I'm just going to sort of drag it into position and see how it settles down on there. Well, despite my misgivings, that is in fact the correct way. So if I can doesn't even want to move, I can gently steer it off there like so. Of course, the last thing we want to have happen is that it sticks down before our time, so we don't want that to happen. So I'm going to just lay a little bit of, so again, first thing is that's too fine tipped. I don't want that. I want a slightly fatter end. Get a bit more loaded on there, and then we can load this onto there like so. Now we've got to get it to work before it runs out of, or it starts to stick too fast. There you go, on there, on there, on there, on there. Well, frankly, Scarlett, that appears to be as close as I'm going to get it. A bit of accelerator. Now that might, at the worst, that might require a little bit of extra finishing. Depends on how it looks. It might possibly just require a little bit of MicroMesh attention to polish back to a universal sort of look, or it might just even be that we put a tiny bit more glue into any visible crack or joint and see what happens. Come along, you out. This non-blushing accelerator from GluBoost, it is phenomenally expensive, but it is stupidly good as well. It beats any other kind of whatever that thing's called, you know, accelerator that I found. So I trust it, and it has bizarrely has a nice perfume smell. Well, I've got to say that isn't 1,000,000% perfect, but I'll give you a close-up, but it isn't actually as bad. You'll see a little bit of the glue residue but we can fill that a little bit. So, you know, you get one shot at it really. What I'd probably do is just sand that back lightly, and I'd probably put a tiny bit of poly on it, and just polish it out. So it's not too bad, but that's what you get. So sometimes people say to me, why are you cutting off that nut in some circumstances? And they'll see me go at the nut. Why don't you just tap it out? And that's why sometimes you can't just tap it out, because it doesn't want to come out that way, and so you're stuck with a broken nut if you're unlucky. But like I say, if you then, instead of that, if you anticipated that possibility and you decided to cut the nut out to avoid any risk of it doing what it just did, then you get, like I say, you get kind of people saying to you, why did you do that? So what I'm just going to do here is I'm just going to hold this down and pull across the top of here just to level this and smooth this out. What you actually get, because it doesn't sit 100% perfect, you get a very slight lip, but again that's quite dealable, withable, especially if we're going to do a little bit of finish repair. So I'm just going to run the file just to minimize that lip. So the problem with glue, as you saw, is that you're quite quickly committed. You don't have a lot of leeway, and certainly don't have as much leeway as you would like. And I found out the hard way many times before. So it really is a matter of applying, you know, putting the glue on and giving it your best shot, which may, unfortunately, not be the best thing ever, but like I say, you just don't have an option on it. You've got to do, that won't fit, will it? I don't have anything that cuts sideways in here. Yeah, so you just don't have a choice. You've just got to go with what comes to you and hope for the best. And if it is a little bit over seated, like, or you know, floating a tiny bit like this, then you have to do whatever you can to correct it. Let's just see where we are with the fit. So it's a little, well no, it's actually fine, as you can see. So we've got the thing out. We're going to need to do a little bit of a tiny bit of repair at this end with the finish. So again, you can just give it a little bit of a pull here. If we feel that there's a gap, then the thing to do is to put a little tiny bit of this finish stuff in. I use stuff called this glue is actually called GluBoost. It's a really good repair product, and that actually looks pretty good on that end. It's almost unnoticeable, but by the same token, we would still do a little tiny bit of a pull like so, just to make sure we smoothed it off so it wasn't noticeable. Again, that isn't hard to none of that would be hard to sand out, but what we might do, I've chucked it away now, haven't I? What we also could do, we could either do this with what's the word, that stuff, polyurethane, yeah, or we could do a very tiny go with glue and get right into that little gap there, this time using the absolute tip of the cocktail stick. So I don't want a large amount built up on there, I just want to get the smallest. The problem is you get too little and then it dries and you don't get any, effect like so. So this is not working the way I intended. It doesn't help that I'm placing this on paper. But what I'm just trying to do is just get a little bit of extra glue into that crack. In fact, we can, I'll just settle for what I've done here. Now we can spread that across, and actually it gives us a sort of finish. Some people finish whole guitars in this glue finish. Not done it myself. I've seen people repair, I think Dan Earlwine at, what's it called? StewMac has done whole acoustic guitar tops in this super glue or GluBoost stuff. So it's amazing how much you can do with it. But you just have to not panic, and you know, you can, once you've sort of got it repaired, then it's a matter of just playing a very careful game with some very light sandpaper. This is 1000 grit, so hardly removing anything, and I'm just holding my finger in place where I want the paper to do the cut or the sanding bit. Like I said, that glue can sort of do the job of the finish, and we could probably, because I've put some extra glue on there now, we could probably get that whole area to shine up just using MicroMesh papers and possibly just a little bit of buffing compound. And you could go from, I could go through a set of papers here from this 1000 grit, which tends to be my start point when I'm doing little finish repairs like this. Start with the 1000 grit and then move up through the papers to about 3000, and then onto the MicroMesh. So my feel there is it's almost entirely smooth. A little tiny bit of a little tiny bit more to just pull on the back here, like so, right on the edge. Yeah, so you can do a lot of good repairs. You just have to not panic. Like I say, with the nut, if it's not coming out at all, it might have been a smarter move to basically just take all the forget trying to drift it out, and instead use a bit of a saw and get it out that way. So I'm just at the moment just trying to see if I've got a little bit sticking up proud here that I want to take off. So I'm just yanking it like sideways a little bit. Yeah, there's a tiny little raised bit, and again I could just do it with a tiny little bit of back and forth. And what's also very good about this GluBoost is if you don't have any finish poly, for example, there's a tiny little bit still sticking up. If you don't have any poly finish to do the sort of final bit, what you can do is use this glue. And Dan Earlwine, his little demo is very good because he shows how he uses it. And I think the GluBoost people, when they do their demos, show how they use it like this. So they get let's get a piece of paper. So they get a little bit of the glue and they put it onto the surface, and then they just dab a little piece of tissue in it. What they do is they just wipe like so, and they go, that's it, that's my top kind of layer finished. And I guess they would probably do a bit of that too. And then you've got the lovely smell, which is always nice. But then you can just sort of rub it back, and actually there's a tiny bit of glue there, but within a tiny bit of time with the MicroMesh, that will be polished up and shining like nobody's business. So let's do a little tiny bit more. Let's see, we'll do the side part there as well. Give me a little point to this. Yeah, so GluBoost, it's expensive, but it really is. I use it a lot of the time just as super glue for this kind of repair. But I use it as super glue full stop, because that's what it is. But it's a fantastic material. So I'm just going to go all the way over this brown end, the rosewood end, and over the top here with this GluBoost. So that's me kind of loaded those repairs up with a bit of glue here, which I can then sand back. Put a tiny drop more on, yeah, just loading it a little bit more, and then when I come to finish off with the MicroMesh, it will be a little bit of MicroMesh with water and then a bit of buffing compound at the end, and you won't know. Now that has got us back to where we were, which is great. Always the way. And the next thing we've got to do is the little boost for yonder, let's get rid of that too, boost for the nut. So again, we'll use some of the glue as well. Let's zoom out because you need to sort of see what I'm doing. So the next bit is I will go and find me some that stuff, rosewood, and I've got plenty in the scrap bin, rods and ends. Let's find a flat piece. Oh, look, rosewood, flat rosewood. I'll cut a piece and bring it through. Hold on. Just thinning it back a minute. Let's line that up there. To there. Halfway. Bear with me. Bear with me. That'll do. So, a small piece of rosewood. I've got kind of flatten this edge, thin down the other edge. So this edge has got a bit of pencil marking on it, which I don't want. So let me just take that off. This one, just making sure this is our gluing edge. Get it nice and flat, smooth and flat. Right. Okay, that's nice. Need this again in a minute. So to begin with, what I'm going to do is get me glued up, and then we'll cut off and size down to get where we want to go. So this is building up crusty bits all over it. Where can I get rid of them? Come along. Thank you. Right, so if I were to put it's a bit of a wedge, but we'll level that out. So I'm going to put a piece down there like that piece, and I'm going to put this on there like so, and I'm going to line it up as close as I can to the edge. And funnily enough, sometimes it seems to want to behave like a sticky substance, and sometimes it doesn't. I'll just put my GluBoost out of the way. Damn! So what I really want this to do is to stick down, and it's not doing that right now. Right, let it wobble around for a minute before I get this out. It's amazing. Sometimes, like I say, it'll do. If it really won't do it to this rosewood, it did yesterday. Now it's starting to try and stick. Come on, you devil. If it really doesn't want to stick, then I perhaps have to give in and revert to some tusk. Oh, this thing. Come on. Honestly. Expensive and not always very easy to use. Okay, so let's call that our stuck down thing. Now I'm going to go across. I'm going to go back to the bandsaw, cut this back, and then I'm going to take it to the belt over there and just thin it down somewhat, and then we'll fine tune it. Just that's what I'm doing out in the world here, so don't worry, I'm still here with you. that's that bit cut to size. Let's get this bit rolling. That's good enough for a mechanical device. We don't want that thing bashing it to pieces, so we're going to bring it back to a combination of hand sanding. I hope you can see hand sanding and a little tiny belt sander. So I'm going to sort of take off the try and bring it back to flush with the nut. But again, very much a process of feeling my way and keeping the nut part off the sandpaper as much as possible. I don't necessarily want to thin it down at all, only at the last minute. So yeah, and all of this because they don't make an absolutely matching nut. How about that? Funny, isn't it? Okay, so just right now, I'm just going to sand the bottom of this a little bit, and then we'll just have a sort of reconvene and check what we've got. Take away the burrs and little bits over. Okay, so we're getting very close. I'm going to take a bit off either end to level that up, and then we want to bring this down flush without thinning down the whole nut. And I would say we've got about 1 millimeter on there at the moment. So I'm just going to go over to the light belt sander over here, a little tiny one, thanks to Paul for gifting it to me. And that end. So we've got the ends right, the right size, and now we're just kind of a little bit away from on the thickness, but again, it is the most sensitive bit, because what we don't want to do is we just don't want to take away the nut material. We don't want to thin this nut down any further. So I'm just trying to get rid of the last bit of rosewood right up to practically being flush, which it is there, and then we can have a sort of gentle feel. So it's a little bit too thick still, which is perfect. And then we go to the fine-tune department. You think, God, is this all set up? What's he doing? He's been here forever. Well, that's how it is. So we get, and you might think, well, why not leave the original nut if a replacement like that is all that trouble? You know, you've had to repair some damage, you've had to, you know, carefully kind of cut a nut down to size with a shim, rosewood shim on it. And the reason that it's worth doing is because when you get to the end, you've got a nut, a guitar that will play and stay in tune. Oh, what a beauty. I mean, you know, perfect fit. Now, at this point, we're in a position now, a happy position, of being able to test for the height of the nut and see whether our slots are needing to be, or the nut needs to be reduced, which is a matter of sanding away the rosewood, or whether we're close enough and the final bit will be done with a tiny adjustment of the nut slots, which I'd prefer not to do. It'd be much nicer if we can get to where we want. Now there's a tiny bit of extra width which yeah, a fraction of extra width. I mean, a whiff of width. So these are looking, this is looking almost perfect. God blimey. An accidental, well, any further down I would have had to put more on. I just guessed it, which is not a very smart thing to do. I think we are on the mark. Don't touch the underside of that with anything, Sam, or else you'll be too low at the first fret. Right, we got a tiny smidgen to remove from one end, so I'm going to do that now. The reason I do it, the sizing, end-to-end sizing, do it off the neck, off the guitar, is because it's really difficult to do. Once it's on, you end up cutting into the finish or making mistakes. Very difficult to cut the nut without cutting the finish. There you are, that's my guesstimate. Now, the scary bit comes, we could, well, we should really use these old strings to hold this nut down, but we don't have to just yet, so I'll do it before I ditch these strings forever. So the thing we need to do, we know the nut is now absolutely perfect. Phew, fingers crossed. But the reason it's good is because I've had a bit of experience doing it for a while recently. Now what you can also see down here, perhaps maybe not the right angle, can you see in the reflections there's wear all the way along here? So the kind of early chords have got quite a bit of what people would call cowboy chords wear. You see that? Which is quite normal. It's just you know, it's a well-kept guitar, but it's been played a fair bit, which is always a good sign. We much prefer to see that. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to wipe off the dust. I'm now going to mark up the frets. And once we start leveling, you'll really be able to see the wear grooves show up, because they're lower than the surrounding material that these are. Just making it a little bit difficult. Come on. I think I really need string spreaders, but hell, I'll do it in 2 bits. Yeah, so once we start leveling, you'll see the extent of the wear grooves, but you'll also be able to see quite quickly how much is possible to remove during the leveling process. Now, one of the things I've always maintained is that unless a customer specifically says to me, I want you to remove those ugly grooves, if they do say such a thing, if they say that, then I will remove those ugly grooves at a cost of whatever fret metal it requires, so long as it doesn't make the guitar unplayable. But normally what I would say to a customer is that I don't think it's a good exchange just for the cosmetic improvement, because in a way it's mostly cosmetic. It doesn't really, those light grooves don't really affect playing. I see people in forums all the time stating that they're absolutely authoritatively that it affects intonation and so on and so forth. It doesn't. Intonation is a physical distance-based property of the guitar, and you would have to, those holes, those ditches, pits, grooves would have to be, you know, 1/10 of a mil deep to have any impression on the, or make any impression on the intonation. Okay, that's our starting point. So as a reality check, let's see where we're at. Yep, as a reality check, we've got the neck relief set at a tiny amount for our tens, and I say a tiny bit more than none, which this is. Then we've got the last fret action set where I want it, and we've redone the nut so that the first fret action is where I want it. And there we go. So now we're ready for the precision fret leveling extravaganza, and that is where we get the good old banana fret leveling tool. And I could either repeat myself for the 53rd millionth time about how and why it works, but it's always interesting, especially if, Paul, you haven't necessarily seen all my videos, and you know, lucky you if you haven't had to watch them all or sat through them. But so there's no reason why you necessarily would know how I do what I do or why it works the way it does. So I think I'm trying to say it simple ways some days, and sometimes I achieve it. I said a bit earlier on that all guitars have uneven frets, and that's either because they are physically uneven. They've been perhaps, you know, some don't get, some hit a bit of gravel in the nut slot and therefore they don't seat properly. Sometimes they, go on biker, sometimes they might be hit a bit harder or pressed a little bit harder, so they go in a fraction more into the wood than other, you know, pressed down into the fretboard a tiny bit more than others, or you know, that's the usual thing, one of those two things, or they maybe just didn't seat properly and didn't get pressed in, and then the glue that somebody used set and they stayed where they were. But that's very relatively rare. It's not often that you find a guitar with those on. What I found over the years of doing fretwork on guitars is that the thing that causes more fret unevenness, relative unevenness, is what happens to the neck wood when the strings are tuned up to pitch. And so the two things that, well, one thing's really trying to happen is that this end of the headstock with the tuners is trying to pull towards this end with the bridge saddles, and of course they can't really move. So what happens is it does compression. Partly that compression results in a little bit of curvature in the neck because it's trying to, if it can't pull that way, it's going to go that way if it can. But if it can't do much more of that, it nonetheless still causes a little bit of undulation in the fretboard. It's very difficult to see because it's tiny amounts, but it does it, and it's enough to put the frets out of slightly out of levelness in relation to each other. And so normal methods of fret leveling take the strings off and use the truss rod adjuster to dial the neck flat as possible, and then they get a flat beam and they run the flat beam over the flat neck or the flat frets, and then in doing so they get all the frets, and they level all the frets, and they check with a rocker to make sure they're all level relative to each other. Now that isn't a bad way of doing it, and it's a million times better than not doing it at all, but it doesn't deal with this compression bunching, or the bunching that happens as a result of compression. And so people who level that way get a lovely level set of frets. You don't get any clicking of your fret rocker. Now I would argue that's actually taken more material off than you would need, but I can come back to that at a later date. But they get a nice level set of frets, then they put the strings back on, tune it up to pitch, and my argument is then what they will do is reintroduce this bunching on that neck, which they didn't level for, so that the nicely level frets they got relatively level relative to each other now are under compression, and as a result they are now assumed a slightly different arrangement, and it throws them out slightly. So that's why when I came across this method of leveling with the neck fully loaded and in the playing condition that we wanted in, so tuned to pitch and relieved a little bit the way we'd have it when we're playing, if I could level with that in that condition, I'm then doing the fret leveling, but I'm also leveling out that extra bit of unevenness created by the compression. And every single neck responds differently because it's organic wood and the grains are all different and the patterns are all different. every neck bunches differently. No two are the same, and some, like I'm finding very often, many roasted maple necks barely bunch at all. There's something about roasted maple that seems to resist it, which is great. So what I've done is, to begin with, I tuned this beam to the same curve, general curve, as this neck, and in doing so, because I sampled the neck in 3 places, here, here and here, and I made the beam follow that approximate, the same curve but very smooth curve, because I only sampled it in 3 places. The truth is that the actual neck it follows that curve overall, but it does it in a wibbly, bunched up sort of way. So what I then get is a smooth curve, which I then bring down onto the wibbly curve, and it's that makes the difference. And remember I said to you at about 5 or 6 or 7 we've got a low spot, and then up here just before, look at this, this is proof of the puds. So my first pass with the tool tells me the following, if I can get you the light reflected correctly. Here we go. So cutting, notice the little dimple, the fret groove there, and tiny, no sign of it there, but you can see the fret, the wear grooves on those first 2 frets. But forget those for a minute, look at the cutting. So it's cutting, none at all. That fret is down in a ditch. It's only a fret long. It's cutting there, next one, but not massively high. Then it's back up, and then look, just before 12, as I said, there's a ditch. That isn't cutting, that's just, I didn't get to it with a pen. But these 2, and I call it 3 because that's barely touching. So these 3 are in a dip, as I predicted from playing it earlier on. So I got it right there, and I got it right there. And this is also a little dip. It's not so bad. And then the rest are okay, except the ends of here are a little bit low. So this is a great method because it tells me all of that from the first pass. But more importantly, as you saw me on this same video, I said to you, there's a low spot there and there's a low spot around just before 12. And lo and behold, this has just proven, this fantastic method has just proven exactly what my playing suggested. It's not my playing that's any good, it's the fact that I could tell that there were low spots there. Another reason why this leveling method is so good is that because I've got the strings on and I can play the notes once I've done a tiny bit of leveling, is I stop as soon as the action I've chosen, which we've got set dialed in here, as soon as all those notes are playing adequately, I stop leveling. So even though there's a low spot there, I know those low spots are there, but the action is still, relatively speaking, high enough, even though we've dialed in our ideal target, which we're happy with, it's still high enough to be above the level of these low spots getting in the way. They did a little bit before, hence I could hear them and predict them. But they play okay now with a little bit of leveling. So I'm leaving that track and moving on to the B track, even though I can see I've still got low spots in the, let's get this out from under here, it's annoying me. Still got low spots in the fretboard, but I don't have to level it down to absolute 0 where it's all absolutely level. I just have to level it so until it plays the way I want at the chosen action, which we already have dialed in, and the strings are there and I can reinstall them in the slots and test it out. So I'm stopping as soon as my chosen action plays the way I want, and that means without what I call fret slap and without fret buzz or any other major issues. So I'm seeing here still the low spot there. There's still a low spot on the B here, but it's picking back up on the 10th and the 11th, and that's okay. We've still got a little bit of a low spot here on the 13th, 14th, 15th and 16th, but again, probably not enough to create any negative effect. So this is the first 2 tracks. first two tracks are playing fine. Now, the interesting thing is when we get to the, we want the guitar to be leveled, the frets to be leveled, so that all notes play. And we're choking out a bit there, and that's because we're actually in a dip here, if you remember. So we had a little bit of a dip here on this edge, but now it's moved off into being a bit more of a dip around here on the B and the G. But what's around the E a little bit. What's happening is wherever we're fretting in a dip, it tends to result in choking out a bit further up on the bends. So around about the G track is really important to recalibrate, because the G track, as I call it, the slice of the neck or the strip of the neck where the G string lives, more or less, this tends to be the one that gets in the way of our high E bends. So if we have those low spots, the high E bends will choke out somewhere in the G track as we bend up and across the radius of the neck. So I'm at this point I'm sort of preparing to level a little bit more until I get that note that we heard choke out on the E. I want it to come across into what I call the G track, and I want it to bend successfully across into the G track without choking, and that will be achieved if I can get this thing out of the way a little bit. You get in there and you sit on there. Right, so we've calibrated the beam, and now we're on the G track, which is the one that, as I say, tends to, any imperfections or any unevenness in the G track, it's very easily picked out when we try and bend the high E up and across into the G track. So I'm sort of expecting to have to do a little bit more leveling work on this one, as is normally the case. But again, a few sort of goes like now, and I'll stop and evaluate what I've got. Still low there, higher there, it's okay. So low-ish, these two, back up, nice, low again after here, these 4 or 5 even, back up a bit and low on the last fret. So we know we've got this low spot here, and as we bend across on that high E, that's what's choking out. Let's see if we can get this, that little bit of work in the G track. Let's see if it's, that's choking out just there. So that's practically pushing it across into the D track, which is almost a bit too far. I mean, I think when we do the D track, that will clear up that last little bit as it bends over into the D track. So yeah, so now we recalibrate for the D, and then on we go. So this is if you're a kind of digital maths typey person, which I'm not, you'll kind of get that. Imagine I'm sampling this curve of this neck in a very low sample rate of 3 pixels, 1, 2, and 3, you know, for the whole length. And of course, that, if you drew those 3 positions up on a graph, like so, you know, if you said, look, here's a graph, for example. I don't know why it's a graph, but let's say one's there, one's there, and one's there. And you say, well, okay, what can I tell you about that? Well, I can tell you that if I join up in a curve, we've got that, right? That's a sort of nice curve between them. But in truth, what we have got is we've got a thing that goes like this. For example. So the real life thing is bumpier and less precise or less perfect than the sample suggests. But the great thing is that the beam is calibrated to the red line, the result of the sample. So it gives you a perfect curve representing this imperfect wobbly curve that we know is reality. And so that's why using this perfect curve down onto the imperfect curve seems to be really good for clearing up basically any uneven frets, but also it takes care of that type of fret buzz that I've separated out and called a different thing. I call it fret slap, which is this kind of sound. That attaches itself, or you can hear on almost all of the notes playing up there. So that's quite an interesting definition of thinking about uneven frets, which are the ones that are single frets that are high or low, and tend to be located in one spot or another. And this thing I call fret slap, which tends to be that rattly sound, which is still a buzz, but it tends to be connected with sometimes half the keyboard, half the fretboard, or patches here and gets really bad here. So that's a really interesting definition for me, because I tried to sort of figure out what am I hearing when I hear this, what I call fret slap. And what I realized, or my hypothesis, which seems to have been borne out over time, is that what I'm hearing is the strings spinning in their they spin in sort of pulses, but the strings spinning and hitting variously these little high spots. So there are what I call along here. We know that we've got some individual problem frets. Let's say a high and a low fret. Let's say we know that somebody stuck a fret here that was not done properly, and somebody hammered a fret here that was too low, for example. Those are where we experience that sort of familiar fret buzz. But what we've also got is we've got a sort of a hill here and a valley here, and a hill here, valley here, a hill here, valley here, hill there, valley there. And it's the hills that get clipped by the strings in a whole range. So if you've got a couple of hills, significant hills here, you'll strike the string, open string, or the first fret or whatever, and you'll catch it. It'll catch as it spins on these hills here. And so that's what, and wherever you play it, it'll do a similar thing. So what I'm doing now is I'm leveling, still ostensibly doing the same thing as before, but I'm leveling with the thought of this hills and valleys in mind, because that's what it causes the rattling sound. So that's not bad, but it's still a tiny whiff of it. So at this point, I go back to it, and what I tend to do is I tend to lighten up my pressure on the bar. And if you think about it, I'm trying to, what I'd like to do, most ideally, is I would like to, imagine the red line now is my beam that I'm leveling with. What I really want to do is to put it down gently on top of these uneven peaks. And I want to gently take them down a little bit. And what I'm aiming to do, in a sort of simple way of thinking about it, is the only thing you can do when you've got when you've got low frets. Imagine this is your fretboard, again, and those are your hills and those are your valleys. If you're fretting in a valley, okay, your string will strike at the top of the next hill. So fretting in a valley starts choking out, or you choke out at a certain level, a certain action height. For a certain action height, if you're fretting in a valley, you'll choke out. If you're fretting at the top of it, you'll get better clearance and you won't choke out. So your action really is governed by your low spots and your high spots together. And all you can really do with the fret leveling method is to hope to basically tame off the highest peaks of your actually you can't do it that way, the highest peaks of your whatnot, so that the distance between the highest peaks and the lowest troughs is smaller. That distance there is smaller than that distance there, which is where it was before. And if you can reduce that distance down using this fret leveling method, you get the ability to play at a lower action without so much fret slap. Now, of course, if you find that you can't improve it at all, then the only option you've got is to basically raise your playing action very slightly. And my advice would be, if you're going to do that, do it at the bridge saddles. Don't go to your truss rod as a way of raising the action. Whilst cranking the truss rod does have an effect on the action more in the middle of the neck than anywhere else, it's not the primary place to go to adjust your or control your guitar's playing action. That's there you should be going to the bridge saddle. So I've got a little bit still in the first half now. This half is cleaned up, and I'm just now looking for a tiny bit more. And what does that mean in practice? It means I get the tool and I'm still holding it lightly, but I'm just kind of concentrating on this end of the fingerboard. So a little bit of kind of side to side, front and back. We're moving about a centimetre and a half front and back, and we're going from side to side to kind of follow the radius of the neck. And that's all I'm doing, just a little bit of lightweight movement. The skill, I guess, is knowing when you're going to stop. If you're brand new to this practice, this technique, you might slightly better. You might find yourself going on too far. Going on too far and end up just cutting away too much fret metal, which you don't want to do. I'm having to move the strings over to one side on this at the moment because they're in the way. Let's see, this. Put this back on and pull the nut the correct direction. Thank you, that'll do. Okay, so we're now onto the A track, and again, I'm just going to lightly use it. Remember, I'm thinking of this. Sound effects free. Yeah, I'm thinking of just taking down taming those peaks, really, hitting those hills, pacifying those peaks, and managing those mountains. Now, of course, this is because this is the lower you go with an action, the more susceptible you are to any climate changes. I don't mean climate change politically, I mean environmental changes throughout the year. Not bad, a little tiny fraction more. Yeah, so that if you have a very high playing action, it may well be that your that your neck can flatten out in the winter when it dries out a bit, and you won't even notice it, or it can bend the other way in the summer, and because your action is higher, you won't notice it. So the high action, as it did when you bought a guitar as a kid, and whoever had it before, or the shop or the factory, invariably set the action fairly high, so that when I got it, it played without buzzing and choking mostly, and off you went. But as soon as you tried to lower the action, what you suddenly found was you ran into the chokes and buzzes, and of course that was because at that preferred action, the degree of unevenness of the frets caused a mixture of one or two frets not being seated properly, but the majority being the result of the bunching of the neck. There was unevenness, which as you lower the action, you run into it basically. As you lower the height of the strings, you run into that unevenness, and it shows up as buzz or fret slap. And so, you know, at that point we would be sort of bleating and crying and wondering what we had to do to get, you know, a guitar with a butter-like smooth low action that didn't buzz and choke. And of course the big manufacturers were quite happy to peddle us a story that if you wanted a guitar like that, of course you had to buy an all-American Hamer or a Gibson or a Fender from the Corona factory or whatever, you know, whatever the story was. And of course they wanted you to believe that because they wanted to sell you their prize wares, and you wanted to believe it because it's something to hope for, and one day you would be able to have such a guitar. And the truth is it wasn't the case. That's not even in tune, that's why. Yeah, so they wanted you to believe that spending 1,500 quid would solve your problem. But it doesn't. Bit more. Yeah, so they would definitely want you to believe that spending that much money on one of their products would give you the ticket to fret happiness, low action bliss. And it isn't the case. The case is even those, you know, premium guitars need this work doing, and probably that also affirms this idea about the bulk of the unevenness that we have to level out being caused by the compression of the strings, because, you know, your typical manufacturer doesn't seem to address it that way, and your typical guitar store, I don't ever hear talking about it that way. They just think frets have to be even when the strings are off, and you get your, you know, fret rocker, and that's the job done. But, you know, if every guitar's neck bunches differently, then of course you're going to need to do that extra work. I quite like the way that's playing right now, so I'm good with that. That's the what do you call it, fret leveling beam, the famous banana, back up on its magnet. So what I'm going to do now is, we have immediately following fret leveling, we have to what do we have to do, Captain? We have to re-crown the frets, and then we have to mask off the fingerboard and then sand and polish them out, which I always do off camera because it gives me a chance to have a drink and stop talking to camera for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is. But we also, before we go off camera and do that boring bit, I want to take a look under here and solve the problem of why the just why the tone circuit doesn't work. Now we had a bit of issue, well, I had some trouble with the selector switch that seemed a bit troublesome. Now I don't want to change it if I don't have to, so I will test it or examine it closely when we get the cover off, and we'll see if it works with a bit of contact cleaner and some care and attention. Stupid me. Right, I'm going to do something. What I really should have done just at this point, I could do it now before we go any further, is to put on the glue down the nut. And for that, we really do need the strings handy. But what I'll do is I'll cut these strings short, because at the moment we don't need them all this extra length getting in the way, and it will stop me tightening them up quick enough. So we're going all the way to this one, and we're going to take off that much, and I'll just I'll go through this again at the end when I put the new strings on, but I'm sort of cutting it to the length that I would normally use, or close to. You might notice that the secret is to put the end of the string down the hole. That's where it's meant to live. That was the design, the original kind of intention in the design. Okay, so we've got way too much on here as well. So typically what I do is I go to the one I'm aiming for, and I go 2 tuner posts past, which gives me the wind on. So I put it into the hole, right to the bottom, bend it over, press it down so it angles it, and then wind it on. And I've found that the split post tuner like this is one of the most reliable tuners ever. There's no reason to replace it, and it hurts me when people say, "Oh, get rid of those split post things. I hate them." They are totally reliable. I mean, these are a little bit Chinese-y, Indonesian-y. In other words, they're not quite as smooth operators, as I would like. But the truth is, they will never put your guitar out of tune in any way, shape or form. So let's just put them on loosely. So what I can do is I can hopefully just hold things out of the way, put a drop of glue in there, and then the problem with this always, I have this sort of challenge. Do I set this up so that I can grab the string, put the nut on, grab the string, and then press it down and hold it down with the strings, which is a kind of nice idea in principle. Or do I just put the glue in, hold it down, get rid of the strings out of the way altogether, hold it down, and then make sure that I've held it in place, but then we don't really benefit from the string being available for doing any grabbing. So it's a difficult one to know. So what I'm trying to do at the moment, so I'm just putting the strings out of the way on these little posts, little dowels I put on the side. Oh, that's not going to work, that's the wrong bleeding string, isn't it? So I'm getting the strings out of the way first of all, the ones I don't need, but I'll want to use these 2 middle ones. I want them out of the way to get the glue in there, so I want to be able to hook them out, press them down, tighten them up. So I'm getting ready to tighten them up. Which way is going to tighten? No, other way. Okay, so that's ready to tighten. Get me a thing with the glue, get me the nut. Now the most important thing is to get the nut in and to have space to feel the end so it's in place, then get the strings in. So what I typically will do is we can put a bit of stuff there. Now we can put a little bit on the base, and then we can lift it up like so, put it in like so, hold it in smoothly in place like so, get the first one, actually it's the low E, and I'm going low E and low E, low I, high E. I seem to have picked those 2, which isn't exactly a brilliant choice for putting pressure on the thing. Okay. Well, that sort of goes some way to hold it in place. That was my plan, but funnily enough, if you don't get that right, before you know it, the nut is glued slightly out of place, and when you're dealing with needing it to be flush with the end, because you've prepped it perfectly, then you absolutely need it to stay in the right place. Okay, so the next bit of the setup is the fret crowning. So I think we can call that glued in. Right, let's undo these, and let's now ditch the strings. They've done their service. So these are all down the bin. comes the wound on ones. This end. And this one appears to have some sort of knotted thing going on, which is a terrible idea. You won't be surprised to hear me say that, Paul, but I don't like it, and you don't need to do it. And the reason you don't need to do it, because all that it means is somebody like me ends up having to start wielding sharp things at this end to get strings out, or you. So you don't want to invite sort of damage. I'm just poking the strings out. Probably should have taken, I will need to take off the plate at the back anyway. So it would have been easier if I'd have taken that off first, but I still got all the strings out as it happened. So having these off is a good idea. Just so that we can adjust the tremolo, set it as a down only. I've double checked my notes. I think it's down only we're setting it. At the moment it's kind of too far, too tight on the springs, so it will be very difficult to operate. Okay. Right, so off to the side. Ooh, copper. Yeah, it's pulled all the way in. We'll take care of that later. Right. So the thing I'll do now is the crowning of the frets, and so for that we'll support the neck a bit like so. Oh no, storage full. You can't be full. Hold on a second. Yeah, well, manage. Yeah, I emptied this out today. See you in a minute. Right, you know, it's so stupid, that phone. It has to be switched off and switched on to register the fact that I cleared and deleted out all the old video files earlier on today. So without doing that, without switching it off and on, it told me it deleted them. I deleted them from the recently deleted, you know, as if it had cleared all of it up and made it all just perfect to carry on, freed up all that space. It told me it had freed it all up, and then didn't. And it only does it when I switch it off and switch it back on. That's the only way I've found to solve the problem. Stupid Apple. Stupid, stupid, stupid Apple. There we are. That's how it is. I have to live with it. But I should have switched it on and back off and back on. Anyway, crowning of the frets. So we've done some leveling, and now we're crowning them. What does that mean? Well, as we leveled, we flattened the top slightly, which is natural part of leveling, but we don't want to leave the fret top flat. So what this file does is it, as you can see, I paint some marker pen on the top, and I run this concave file along the top, and it rounds off the edges on either side, the flat spots, and rounds off the corners of those flat spots, but does it in a way that I keep an eye on the amount of marker pen still left, and I want to leave a tiny thin black line on the top of the fret like that. And actually, as you can see on this one, it also tells us we've got little dimples still here with the pen still caught in them. That's how it's going to have to be, because as I said, you remember that I'm not really that keen on trading fret life for cosmetic dents, unless they're absolutely causing a problem in playing, and like I say, they have to be quite severe to cause an actual problem. So that's pretty good for that one, and then we can sort of move on and off we go. And you'll see that some of them, where they were higher relative to everything else, you'll see that some of them require a little bit longer, and I also clean off the diamond coated surface here just to make sure that the pen grime comes off. Was I going to say something about this? I've forgotten what I was going to say. Anyway, so this is a good sort of indicator of how much leveling you've actually done. See that marker pen there? That will come off when I clean the fretboard after I've done the sanding out and everything. Yeah, you can, once you get into the swing of this, it's this process of crowning that confirms to you how much you did or didn't level physically off any one fret. So this one is a little bit more heavily hit in certain areas, and it takes a little bit longer to level out, and that's typically the higher spots that we find that applying to. The very bottom of the trenches or the valleys we barely touched at all with the leveling beam, and sometimes we didn't touch them at all, so they won't take any more time or hardly any time to recrown. Then we'll come up the other side of the low spot, you will suddenly see a much flatter spot where you had to level more. Now the good thing about this, as you probably will have spotted, that I'm doing this with the strings off, and actually if you try to check the levelness now with your fret rocker, which is the sort of traditional way, and with the neck like so, you will probably register these frets as being slightly not level, because in this configuration they are not level with each other. But what will happen is that I've leveled them as they were when they were under load, and all that we care about is that when we put these back under load with the new set of 10s, they will revert to the relative levelness that we got when we leveled them under load. Do you see what I'm getting at? So it's really great that we don't have to worry about this from here onwards. We know that these frets will now revert to relatively level once we load them. Now, of course, they may be slightly different if we put on much heavier gauge strings, or they may be slightly different if we put on much lighter strings. So it follows that you do want to level in close to, if not the gauge of string that you're going to play with. Occasionally I've done it one gauge of string out because I know it'll be close enough, but and for the sake of, it's usually in a case where I don't have a complete set of 11. So if somebody gives me a guitar with 10s on it and says, I'm going to, oh, here's some 11s, I want you to fit these 11s once you've done the leveling, etc. And so what I don't want to have happen is I don't want to have to put on a set of 11s in order to level with the gauge that we're going to be playing, because that will cost me a new set of 11s that we'll have to then throw away, because I never let the guitar go out with the strings on that I leveled it with, because they'd be worn and a bit mucky by then. So you want new strings. I always want new strings on the guitar as it goes out. So that would then cost me two sets of 11s to, anyway, it's just either the customer pays for it or I pay for it. So it's not a welcome thing really. Okay, before I switch off and do the off-camera covering all of this in, what do you call it, that stuff, masking tape, let's have a look under here and see if we can see why this thing is not playing tone games. See if they're disconnected under here. So I'm going to use the power driver to remove all of these fairly quickly. Secret of using this power driver around screws and fret in scratch plates like this is to always be holding the tip to support it. The only real danger can come when you're standing a screw up at the beginning of trying to screw it in, and if you're not holding the screwdriver and the screw together, you can fall off and the screwdriver bangs into the thingy. Now I'm detecting some WD-40 or something under here. There's grease under here, so that wouldn't be a good material to spray at the pots to make them work if you're having trouble with crackling. So it might, I don't know how old this guitar is exactly, I can't remember, but yeah, WD-40, if you had some crackles and you sprayed the pots with WD-40, that might cause them to stop working. because it's not the right kind of material. Okay, what do they call this? FSR. So this is actually a hard, difficult one to, all right, that's broken off the ground. That's very tight, so that's okay. We'll reattach that. Okay, so it's, you didn't want that tight like that. So let's just kind of whiz back over here, because this has got the grounding wire is all tangled up in the springs, so that's stopping it coming through, which means it was being very tight. So now I should be able to pull it further through. Right, that would be better. And then we'd have more room, at least that much room, to take a look at what we can see. So let's see, is there stuff on here? Well, I can't see any stuff, so that negates my WD-40 theory, but it was, you know, my Columbo senses were on the lookout. So there's our tone pot, and the tone pot should be, it's running across to the first one on this one. That's the volume pot, which looks quite normal. There's a nice little bunch of tidy wires all cable tied here. I might have to clip that, but I didn't want to. We've got 1, 2 and 3, white and yellow. And then we've got across there, we've got out to that one. So why isn't, right, how's that supposed to, okay, we're coming out of there. All right, we're crossing over, that's joining the two halves. The green is going out to that pot there, supposedly. Then we've got the yellow is going out to the middle pot. That don't make sense to me. Let me see now. The green wire, is that the bridge? 1, 2, 3. Bridge, middle and neck. Bridge? No. So all 3 pots are supposed to be connected to a tone. Sorry, all 3 pickups outputs are supposed to be, no, all 3 pickups are supposed to be connected to a tone pot, and it's supposed to be the neck and the middle are supposed to be connected to this one here, and the bridge, it's got the bridge pickup's got its second one all of its own, but it isn't working. Why isn't it working? Could this cross over on the switch? Because this wire here joins the 2 halves of the switch and makes these then available to be used as outputs to the tone. If that was not working, it's possible that it could be why nothing's getting to, but then no, that would be feasible, because and then it wouldn't get to here, the outputs. This would be the output. See, that's the output. It's joined across to there, so that must be correctly joined for that to go to the volume. So for some reason these tones are not working. Why? See, I'm not used to, I wouldn't wire it up this way, but this is a way of using a single, it's an economical way of using a single capacitor for the 2 tones. And I can't get my head around that. So that's through there into the first one. And then it connects to ground. That connects to ground wherever it does. In the middle, third one. Oh, hang on. Yeah, third one blank. Third one blank. There's no reason why this shouldn't work, unless, could it be that this one's touching that one? That is a small but perfectly formed possibility. I won't worry about the bridge claw grounding wire for a minute. Let us do a thing. Let us try. Right. Weird. just absolutely not working at all. How peculiar. I mean, the thing about this now is not being able to tell you if I can't tell you whether these two items here are knackered or not, or whether there's something wrong with them or faulty. And I'm not familiar with this particular wiring thing going across here to be able to tell you whether it's, you know, badly wired and can't possibly work, or whether there's a dead solder joint here stopping this all working. What we know is that the switching output here comes across to here and goes through this cable tie to the volume pot, and we know that's working, and everything about this is working, and it's grounded. How is it grounded? It's grounded from the jack socket onto the top of here, which is fine. I mean, I'm presuming there's a presumption that these tones are grounded by this metal foil here. But is there any other way they're grounded? Well, they are. They're extra grounded on top as well. And that comes across presumably to there. So they're grounded and everything about them should work. Well, crikey me goodness. Now, we said we thought there was some issue with the switch, but earlier on it seemed to be switching between things correctly. Did I have some problem? So my concern really is, do I replace, I got a sort of note about replacing the switch because it was temperamental. In which case, if the switch is faulty, could that be preventing the signal going out? Because we know that the jumper across the switch is working because it's taking the output across to the pot, but we don't necessarily know if there might be something wrong with these outputs, these three outputs here, which go to the tone controls. I mean, I don't really see why anything there is obviously not going to be working. I mean, I suppose I don't suppose it would be any good at all, but I can shoot some contact cleaner into the pots and the switch first of all and see if it makes any difference. I don't know if, you know, because I don't know if any grubby, sticky stuff has been sprayed in there to cause any problems or not. So it might be worth just having a go. Might be worth sticking this in on mode. Stick it in on mode and see if we get any changes. This stupid thing. It's not the right pokey thing. Right, that's obviously going to drip off and fall down there. Let's give it some. That's, by the way, when you use contact cleaner, the most effective thing you can do is to keep operating the switch or the pot that's problematic. That's the most useful thing that will clear the thing out for you. The contact cleaner on its own won't. That made a bit of a noise, like it's something was connected up. Something's happening there. Yeah, the pot is working. How strange. That wasn't working before. So I wonder, it's working. Miracles are miracles. So I wonder, let's just keep turning these while we've got a chance. I'm just going to keep spinning them since we put some goo in there. I wonder if this hasn't been sprayed with something inappropriate, which is why I'm seeing what could have been WD-40, which will coat the contacts and make them not work. So you might as well not have, you know, any metal touching metal with inside the pots then. So that's working. Super duper. Let's fix that kind of. Like I said, lots of repetitions is what you want. are what you want, is what you want. Now, we've got to reconnect this because it's weak and snapped, which is quite common when you use a rigid wire like that. So let's strip it a little bit and tie it back on, solder it back on. Well, I've never solved a problem like Maria, like that, with that stuff, pot cleaning stuff. Never. I've never seen a recovery from dead as a doorknob nail. That's blobbing solder. Come on, just hold on to this, please. Give me a lump, thank you. Let's just add a little bit on the back of here so I can do it separately without anything else coming undone. Like so. Oh, let's take out the one little piece of solder that I dropped. Right. See, there's a load of gunge coming out of there. That is what's happened. I'm telling you now. I'm telling you now. Now, why are you getting in the way? Because you're getting tangled up. Get under there. Thank you, thank you. Lovely. Oh, that is pleasing. Diagnosed and fixed. Do not shoot WD-40. Although, funnily enough, WD-40 does, in fact, make a contact cleaner that has WD-40 written on the side, but it is not the WD-40 that we all mostly know and love. So do not just fire WD at it, unless you've gone and got the special WD brand contact cleaner, in which case you should be fine. But I think the detective Columbo clue was the greasy substance sitting around here that had dripped out or oozed out at some point, which is what made me suspect Mrs. White in the library with the candlestick. Now this says it was an FSR Strat, so I guess that's maybe what it's called. I'm not really sure, but anyway, it's sort of more like a classic vibe than anything else. But anyway, it's not important that I know the actual name of the thing, is it? Okay, look, I'm going to do the next bit without you, which is the bit where I mask off the thing and hand sand it all out with loads of grits of MicroMesh and other stuff. Oh yeah, while I'm at it, actually I'll do the MicroMesh on the end here, on this little bit here. I think that would make sense. So it's just done. All right, I'll see you when I'm ready to restring in a minute. Ooh, we're back. Look at that. I've got a bit more polishing to do at home, but you wouldn't know that a bit of broken off there, would you? Isn't that wonderful? So I tell you, you can make anything look new again if you give it enough time. So just a quick dust down, and then I'm going to load up new strings. Oh, now first of all, I'm going to do a couple of little things. First of all, I'm going to we'll remove this and we'll put temporary one on, Tusk one. It'll be a black one. I've got a white one at home, so we'll put the black one on for now and swap it over with a white one. Because my guitar at home that has a white one on, it's the same, exactly the same, only, you know what I mean. I just haven't got any black ones in stock here, white ones in stock here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drill that a little wider. So the the Tusk thingy is a bit, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a bit wider, so we don't want to stress the wood or crack any finish. So there we go, and that will be perfect for sticking there. I mean, it's black. It could even go with the black scratch plate, couldn't it? I mean, it's no big deal. It's not a problem. Okay, now what I'm going to do is we're going to load up some strings, tiny ball 10s, and I can open them. And after that, we're going to load them up, stretch them out, and then intonate. Make sure they're intonated. But first, I'll put on some oil on the fretboard. So a bit of lemon oil here, just to darken. People say words like nourish the wood. Wood doesn't eat lemon oil, so it doesn't get nourished by lemon oil, I think, really. But we know what we mean. We mean stop it looking so light and dry looking. So we're just oiling it up so it doesn't look so dry. That's all there is to it. You know, maybe it doesn't flake as much when it's a bit oilier, but don't fool ourselves, we aren't nourishing wood with oil. We are just oiling wood with oil. So I can tell, just as we go over the wood here, I can tell how old this guitar is by the fact that it's got some kind of finger wear at the top here, which is, again, good sign that it's been loved a lot and played a lot. So I'm going to load up these tiny balls. If you ever wanted to improve this guitar, I mean, as with all guitars, you could upgrade everything. The body itself is a pretty good start point, but I would be tempted to replace the bridge with a Wilkinson full weight bridge, full weight block bridge with a push-in arm. And actually there, I don't know how much the gold ones are, but a classic Wilkinson one at most 50 quid. But I don't know if our Music Lily makes the budget version, which is actually pretty damn good. I'm not sure if they make the budget version with a heavy block in gold. They should probably do, but the standard Music Lily M series, the Wilkinson M series, made by Music Lily, it's just a partnership. It's about 20 quid on Amazon for the classic tremolo with a full weight block, and that is a great upgrade to even this level of Squier, because this comes with a low mass zinc block, which is not very strong. So upgrade the bridge if you get a chance, and then next one is maybe pickups. So here's how we're going to do the stringing. So we're going to get clippers and we're going to go make sure that the string first of all is right up into the block, and we come to the first tuner and we measure to the next two and we cut off there. That is our maximum amount of stuff. I'm going to get my winder on to make things a bit quicker since we're going later in the day now. Okay, so we take the thing, we put it straight down in the hole like so, and we bend it over the side in the same line as the split, so we can bend it down like so. I don't know how well you can see there. See that? No, see that? Bent over through the split, right? And then we go wind on. And then that sits right down low on the post. So up to the next one, 2 further. That 2 further is really, what, 1.5 inches, 2 inches maximum. So in here, if you can, down to the bottom, bend it out, wind on. Third one, 2 after, cut. You've got to be very careful with that, because if you actually go on autopilot and you get the wrong one, you'll end up cutting too short and you won't be able to wind on. So you've got to be a little bit on purpose. I found out the hard way, as you can imagine. Okay, up to hand here, G and 2, cut. Into G, bend over the side, go. Okay, and this one a little bit different. The B string, come up to the B, we can only go 1 pass, but go 2 anyway. Gauge a second space. It's not that hard to do. Bend it in there, bend it sideways. Under there, and here we go. Up to the end, 2 inches past, just to be on the safe side, cut. Down to the bottom, bend forward, wind on. Okay, so that's a nice, quick and simple way of getting the strings on with a minimum amount of wire string going onto the posts, so they have the minimum amount of slack stored up. And you can see that pull, that was much less windings going around there than you had originally. So then next thing I do is I give it a sort of a general pull carefully. I mean, not too fierce, but a sort of, there you go, a little seating in pull. I can feel things just touching or giving a little bit. And again, it's a 10 gauge set, so you don't have to be too precious, but you can still break them if you pull too hard. Then I tune. So there we are, tuned. Now at the moment, now what's happened is, here's something that's happened. While you weren't looking, while I was off camera, I did an adjustment to the bridge, which I should have told you about or talked to you about, but I don't know if you remember me saying that the bridge plate screws were in the wrong place as well. They were screwed down too far. For this bridge to work, you need to, the way to do it is without strings on, it needs to be dialed in at the back like it is currently, so it's hard-tailed. And then what we do is we slack these screws off, or we tighten them up until the tightening pushes down on the front edge of this, because it's got a chamfer on it. So you tighten until you feel the plate coming down, and then you back off about a half or even a whole turn, and do the same with all of them. And then what you get is you get the plate is now sitting backwards slightly with the front edge slightly raised, and that's because that's how it should be, and that will give you a free movement. But in doing that little preset thing, what I've done is I've raised the, I don't know if you can see me, hang on a second, doink. I've raised the playing action a little bit, so I need to adjust that before I get into the rest of the thing. So we've just gone a little bit higher as a result of setting this up correctly. So I'm going to go down on these saddles. So a bit more fiddle faddle. 125. Now, quite often is the case. In fact, I've got some coming tomorrow, so this might work out. When you have a guitar like this and you set a nice low action, you may well find that suddenly these grub screws stick up a little further than you like. And if you're a palm muting type of person, you might get annoying that they scratch in your hand. It's not the end of the world, but you can buy shorter ones. And I've got some black ones coming. I bought them for Ian's guitar, but actually I found a set as well, so I'm going to fit a set for my set, and there'll be a new set tomorrow which might do the job on here, bring this down so that it's more comfortable. So I'm just checking the playing actions again, so we're a little over. Just about over 150. So it's quite a difference that little tilt makes. So it's really important that you remember that for Strats, is that if you want the tremolo to work, you need to, this thing doesn't sit dead flat, it sits back a tiny little bit. It's a bit odd. Why does it sit? It has a chamfer, but well, I'll show you how once we set it. So now we're out of tune again. Okay, that's the adjustment. I might tweak it again later, but for now that's the adjustment done. So now for stretching, remember your tuning stability on your guitar it's got nothing to do with your tuners. Those are just mechanical things to get your strings up to pitch. They won't undo no matter how hard you bend strings. They won't slip back over time and make the strings go out of tune. They just don't move. They're only to get your strings up to pitch. Tuning stability is dependent or down to two things, 50% equally. 50% the material and condition of your nut, lack of friction, cut correctly for the low first fret action, etc. 50% your nut and 50% the unreleased slack in your strings. Now I'm going to start stretching them out, thumb and forefinger, or thumb and fingers, manually stretching any slack out of these strings. And don't forget, I don't know if you saw, but you probably didn't, when I played it this morning or earlier on, I was able to pull tons of slack out of your strings, partly because of the number of wraps around the top, but also because nobody had ever done this to them. So you need to do this, and every time you change your strings, go over every single string and stretch. Now, the first time you do it, you might break a string 10, the top 10 gauge E if you do it too hard, but you get used to it. But you need to manually stretch it out every single new set of strings, because if you don't, it won't play in tune. It won't stay in tune. So all of that detuning would have come out tiny bit by tiny bit while you were playing. So what we're doing is we're just wringing it all out now in one go. And that will mean a couple of things. First of all, your guitar will play and stay in tune like a miracle. You'll be, it'll be in tune when you take it off the peg. You'll get it into tune instantly almost, and you won't have to check it again for hours. It'll just stay in tune. Now I've done the nut part and I'm doing the string stretching part this time, but you'll need to do the string stretching every time you change strings from now on. And if you do, you'll be rewarded with amazing tuning stability because we've got the nut right. Close, you see? Well, the wound strings hold more. Oops. Okay, do it 2 or 3 times until it stops detuning. Right? How much you do it is down to you and how much you want to invest time in it, but the more you do it and the more thoroughly you do it, the more you're going to be rewarded with stable tuning. And I found as I got older in life, stable tuning actually became my #1 priority. Okay, so now we're going to check the intonation. And intonation is a physical property. Every string on this guitar has to be slightly different length for it to play in tune all the way up and down the neck. And that's because the scale length determines where the frets fall, and there are a few standards. But you can make any length neck you wanted to within reason and calculate where to put the frets. So you could make your own individual scale length that nobody's ever used before, but you could do it. But because they make mass-produced guitars and multiples, and they also want to make interchangeable components and so on, obviously they make a standard or a finite range of scales, so 24 3/4, 24, 25 1/2, or so on. Anyway, and so for each neck that's made, you have so whatever scale length is made, you have a set number of frets in a particular order of getting closer together. But what's interesting is that each string on any given scale length, each string requires a very slightly different length to every other string on any given scale length. So it doesn't matter if you made your own at 8 feet and 3 inches, your 6 strings that you may play or that you chose a gauge that will work with that length, they will all require slightly different lengths, and that's why you've got this adjustable bridge. Now the reason we adjust it is if we look at the tuner, we want to tune the harmonic ping at the 12th fret to be dead on the E in this case. And then what we want for it to be correct, to know that it's the correct length, we need it to make the same note, which it does. So that tells us that this saddle is in the right position. From that point onwards, on a 3 plain and 3 wound, you tend to get, this is the shortest string, this steps back a millimetre, this steps back a millimetre, this jumps forward a millimetre and a half, this steps back a millimetre, this steps back a millimetre, and so on. So it's two groups of three clusters, or two little clusters of three. So if we find the high E, we could pretty much just guess the rest. So I'm going to adjust these all very slightly. I think they're slightly out of place, but I'm going to make them all exactly my millimetre that I know is good. So there's a bit of adjustment to do, and I will then say to you, okay, these will be out of tune because I've changed them, but once we tune them up, and then we know that's correct. Tune. Yay. F sharp, G. When you're doing the thicker strings, that's your harmonic note, your harmonic ping settles on A. That goes sharp, but the note settles on A. So you expect the fatter strings, wound strings, to the attack portion to be slightly sharp when you fret them at the 12th fret. Oh, we're flat there. E flat. Sharp. Resolves to flat, but I will take him at its word, and I will pull this back a tiny bit, and I'll pull this back a millimetre, and I'll pull this back a millimetre. So still my two sets of three. I've got a bit of glue on the back there. Obviously retune. What you want both notes, both chords and both notes 12 frets apart to be true to each other. And so that's what we've got, that's intonated. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to set the tremolo to down only. So the thing is, we've got the tremolos currently done up full tight. We're still recording, thank goodness. Done up full tight on the claw. That's good. As you can see, if you're doing a setup like this, I would want that there all the way through this setup. Now, however, I want to slack it off so that I can leave this still with the bridge plate decked, but I want it lighter to press down. So what I do is I undo this until we see it lifting at the back, so until the string tension starts to pull it up. Still not. So that's all of that. We didn't need that. That's still, that's too far in for these strings. So the tightness of these springs, courtesy of being pushed back with this claw, the springs were overpowering the strings so far, and then eventually as we come out, they'll come to a point where the spring pull will now cumulatively not be enough. So you hear that? That's now slackened off. It's interesting how that sits very slightly north of that. Let's just see one thing. And this is weird too. This whole thing sits sideways. Why does this? I think what's happened is these saddles, by the way, are worn in a certain spot, and so your string always lands up in the same spot, and it's right next to the... This could do with some new saddles. It's been so long in one place. I think that's what's happened. Okay, so now what we've got is let's feel this. Okay, look. Okay, so we're too far out. So what we're going to do is we're going to now go in a little bit so that we touch back down at the back. And I've got a spare tremolo arm, which isn't the right one here, but I'll use it for the time being. So what we don't really want it to do is go back any. Tiny bit of... Nothing touching here, nothing touching the plastic, is it? No? Okay. Going to go back a bit more. We want it to sit tight against the, or sit against the back. That's about right. See, that's interesting. If you oh, you can't see anything, sorry. If you screw these any further down, if you take them out, the tendency of the bridge is to pull back, and in doing so pull the front up a little bit, and that gives you a good, if you get it, leave it like that, it gives you a good hard tail. What I'm trying to do is get the gentlest downwards movement. The problem is it gives you a bit of backwards movement, which it doesn't like. So I'd rather not have the backwards movement and rather use a bit more force on the downward pull. So I'm going to go in a little bit more and ignore the tuning for a second. That's interesting. That touches down on the plate, on the... See, that's the weakness of this thing. It touches down on this little plate here. It touches down first on that plate. And not on this side, unless you pull. So it's like a bit of twist in the basic unit. That's a bit of a weakness. That's funny. I'm going to have a little fiddle with that offline. But I'll call it quits for now because I've got to go home. But we're nearly there, very close. So thank you for watching. See you soon.